Does it take to figure out an iPad cover?
We need one more.
We need more.
Huh?
See,
Hey, Joanne, good to see you. Welcome.
All right. I'd like to use the gavel at work session. Oh, Lord. Thank you. Madam City Manager.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon, ma'am.
Madam Clerk, would you be kind enough to call the roll?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon. Mr. McDowell, Mr. Duval, Mr. Badura, Ms. Plow, Ms. Devine, Mr. Davis.
Here.
Mayor Benjamin.
Here.
Thank you.
Reverend McDowell, would you open us up with a word of prayer?
To the needs of this community. Touch us and innovate us with your presence and with your power. We ask it in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. It's good to see you all. We'll start our city council discussion for today with the Two Notch Road Phase 1 facade project update. Ms. Jerry Lynn Hall, our program compliance specialist for the Office of Business Opportunities.
Hey, Geraldine.
Now I'm on.
You're on.
All right. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I am Jerry Lynn Hall with the Office of Business Opportunities and bringing you up to date on the wrap-up of Phase 1 on Two Notch. That's the facade program. Wanted to get you started. A few shots of some of the work that is going on. We do have a couple of before and afters. 2317 Two Notch Road, McGraw Plaza, and also the Tile Center up in the 2500 block. Here is where we are right now. We've got 4 underutilized properties that were purchased and or renovated. We have 3 by Benedict College, 1 an additional project by Mr. McGraw of Ryan's Family Enterprises. New businesses in facade improved sites. We've got 6 of those, 1 down near in the 1800 block at Flagship, an auto repair. Then we're going to be getting in the Benedict College ticket office, their college athletics department, their football operations. There'll also be a Hall of Fame museum also at the 2219 address. We've got the corporate headquarters for AMP Incorporated at 2315. And at 2332 Notch, we're just finishing up that project, and it is just leased. We don't have any details on that. We wanted to share with folks the contractors and subcontractors that were selected and used through the bid process by the participants. We've got them in any industry. And very quickly, the program statistics. Since the most recent history of the facade program beginning in the Business Improvement District, showing you the funding sources on into Main, North Main, then Phase 1 of Two Notch Road. You can see starting in the bid in Main and Phase 1, we were able to get appropriations from the Community Development Block grant funds. Up until we had to do a bit of a match in Phase 1, and then there were no funds available for the CDBG for 2016-17. So the $100,000 budget that we'll be moving forward with is from the general budget. You can see the amount of private investment in each area that we've wrapped up, and then the total investment, both private and public. And there was also other investment going on within the target area of these facade project locations every year. And this is public investment made along the corridor by property owners, but yet they were not part of the facade program. So you've got our investment and then the additional private investment. It's been very, very beneficial. You can see for yourselves our total of project sites, the number of loans, forgivable grants, and also jobs new and retained in the areas thus far. Where are we going? We are going to Covenant Road on Two Notch between Covenant and Pine Belt. That will be, and that's pretty much to the city limits. It ends out at Carter Street, Pushman Cushman at Pine Belt. The funding structure remains the same at this point. You can see it is for exterior improvements only. We've got single and multi-entrance prices funding for the different businesses. Again, our budget is $100,000. No funding available from CDBG 2016-17 due to all that money going to flood recovery programming. Possible program changes due to the lack of funds. We are contemplating deleting the bonus or reducing the amount of the bonus or reducing the amount of the award. We've got that would be eligible in that area. We've got the minimum of $15,000, and we've only got $100,000, so that's going to limit us to the number of projects. Right now, staff is leaning toward deleting or reducing the bonus, but keeping the price per parcel at $15,000. We're looking to launch in the next section, approximately the 15th of October. It will be a notice of funds available. Applications will be due by the 15th, around the 15th of December, with construction running from January 2017 through the end of March 2017, having everyone submit their pay applications and get everyone paid out in early May, in time for the end of the fiscal year. And that is what I have. Any questions, comments that I can take?
Ms. Devine?
And I'm not sure if this is a Jerry Lynn or a Tina question, but so can someone utilize the facade grant and the vacant abandoned building money?
Oh, yes, you could. We just won't have a added bonus.
Okay.
That was we really wanted to encourage improvement, especially of the vacant properties. They'll still be allowed for their base funding of $15,000. We just won't be able to give them the $10,000 bonus.
So if I utilize and got approved for the abandoned vacant building program, then I could also apply for facade to fix the facade?
Oh, now wait a minute.
That's what I was
might
wondering.
be getting the programming. Are you talking about a separate?
No, Tina?
There's
CEZ?
another program.
The CEZ
I
program.
apologize.
CEZ, yeah, it's a
the
yeah, I'm
CEZ
sorry, it's a
program.
CEZ
Sorry.
program, that's what I said, it might be a Tina question. They are, okay. I was just thinking that next phase of Two Notch, there's a lot of those properties, and it'd be nice if we could maybe make sure that people were aware that those are two city programs to encourage some development right there.
Mr. Davis?
My question was just about the same, with a twist on it, though. If I own a building, it's vacant, and it needs repair, I don't have a tenant. Can I still apply for the loan, or does it, so?
Yes, you may.
So I can apply, fix
Hope
it
you
up,
will.
then promote it for tenancy?
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's it. The ones that are vacant, and if they've been vacant more than a year or two,
Right.
there's generally something else going on with the building, and it really needs some help to improve.
Okay. That's interesting, didn't know that.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, Geraldine. Always do a great job at these, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry Lynn. At this time, we'll have our Public Life, Public Space Action Plan. Mr. John Fellows, our planning administrator here at the city, and Ms. Joanne Turnquist, the president and CEO of the Central Carolina Community Foundation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. We're delighted to be here, John and I. Back in September, those of you who were in office had the opportunity to hear from the folks at Gell Architects from Copenhagen, who shared their vision of what public space does with regards to influencing public life. And you gave us the thumbs up to go ahead and do a public space, public life survey with an action plan to follow, funded by the John L. and James S. Knight Foundation that is held at Central Carolina Community Foundation, where I work. John, in just a moment, is going to talk through that study and the plan that came from it. But what we are going to do today is to ask you for another thumbs up, not to write a check, and not to say we're going to build a building or plant hundreds of trees, but rather, once you hear the ideas that have come through this survey that was done by the folks who live here, that you'll agree that what we need to do is try some of these to see what works, and then come together with a more formalized plan, some more ideas that are tested, tried and true, that we know will work here, and move forward. We have secured a commitment of funding for the trial phase from the Knight Foundation Fund at the Community Foundation. So again, what we'll be doing is not asking for funding, but rather asking for your thumbs up that together we can continue working on ideas that will make our communities more vibrant, help us attract and retain talent, all the things that you've been working on, and you've been really forward-thinking. For perspective, we were only one of 4 cities in the entire country that Knight selected to move forward with Gell Architects. And they did so because our mayor and our council have been very, very forward-thinking in doing things in our city that are helping us to attract and retain talent. So with that, I would like to turn it over to John with just, again, the thumbprint that this was a study and a survey done, not just with the planning department and the Community Foundation, but we engaged folks through across our community, and they gave these ideas a thumbs up as well. So with that, John?
Good afternoon. So the presentation I'm going to give you today is a small, brief component of the actual plan, which we'll pass out. So the actual plan has a lot more meat in it, but we'll just go over sort of the highlights this afternoon. When we met with the community, we asked the question about, imagine Columbia supporting active creative talent and being a leader in the region and the family and being family-friendly public spaces. And so we then asked those questions, and the good news is when we went out to the public and we actually had some public venues actually on the sidewalk and asked people for their participation, they actually were on board with this idea of really enhancing our public spaces in Columbia. And with that, we found out that there was 9 things that were really shared quality components to public space. And those are listed on the screen. They include water, greenery, relaxing, seating, dynamic activities, art and color, closeness, fine-grained kind of community, as well as whimsical and playful spaces. And then what we did through this process is we studied a number of these spaces. So on your screen, there's a number of areas of downtown that are actually circled in those blue bubbles. And we studied those spaces for 12 hours on a weekday and 12 hours on a weekend to actually see what actually happens in those spaces. And we documented them, whether people were sitting, riding a bike, walking, people gathering, children playing, whatever it might be. So we really had a base of knowing what is public space occurring in the community. So then we started to look at how people are actually moving in Columbia. So our public spaces are places where people stay and they move through the public spaces. And so in the document, there's a series of drawings like this, and we started documenting how many pedestrians, how many bicyclists are going through the different areas, at what time of day they're actually moving through the public spaces. And then what Gell was able to do through the resources they have in other communities is they started to compare us to other communities. So they looked at Lexington, Kentucky, Charlotte, and Philadelphia in terms of where we are with pedestrian traffic. And you can see here our peak is about on a certain day, it's about 7 o'clock. And you can see we're reaching into that same zone that you see in Kentucky, Lexington, Kentucky, and Philadelphia and Charlotte. And the takeaways for...
Well, we can see it on this one. We're just, all of us don't have it on our personal one, but he'll get to us, but keep going.
Okay, all right. So the takeaways for the plan in terms of for pedestrians, what we learned was that people really enjoy downtown. There's very few people who actually walk to work as commuters. There's a lot of people who come out of the buildings, their residents and their office buildings for lunch. There's a pretty active happy hour component downtown, that dinner hour period. The weekends are a little bit, lacking in people unless there's a planned activity. And then we find that there's not a lot of families downtown. We'll see a few families by the art museum or certain venues, but overall you don't really see a lot of families. And so that's what we learned about the pedestrians. Cyclists, you can see here on this particular chart, we compared Columbia and Philadelphia and Denver. You can see we start to reach that component. What we learned is there's a lot more bikes on the streets of Columbia than you actually think they are. They're diffused all over downtown, so you don't see them on particular streets in large groups, but you do see them throughout. And so we actually do have quite a few cyclists, which was quite good to actually know that information. And what we learned is that people bike and work to school, people bike and bike to work. The connections for cycling isn't always there. There are some weekend warriors. Those are the people who, in the picture up there, they have all their gear on and that kind of thing. There's the casual users, and then there's the people who are more young and able because they're actually riding with the traffic. And so we also looked at how people are staying. One of the things about public space is how does the public space make you come and stay in a particular area versus just passing through. And so one of the components of this study was looking at the stickiness, and that's a term that Gail likes to use that really defines how someone wants to really stay in a particular location. And on this screen, you can see the blue bubbles, and the size of the bubble kind of represents how sticky that location is. And so you can see that stickiness changes throughout the weekday and the weekend in terms of where that component is. And so we learned a lot about that component of what our public spaces are in Columbia from that perspective. And so we learned that there's high energy to quiet areas. There are, where we have water, a lot of people congregate. The plazas that we have, some of them don't really attract a lot of people. And we also have destination spaces like the steps of the Capitol where people do exercises and jog and go up and down the stairs and yoga and all sorts of things. And then we also don't have a lot of seating. The majority of seating in downtown is actually private seating, either in a private plaza or it's seating that you have to buy a coffee or something. But people do, when they choose to find those places to sit, they stay a long time. And so they really value those seatings. And there's a lot of interaction standing. So we have business people and people who are just passing each other, and they actually stand in certain locations, and they will converse. And then we have a lot of secondary seating, and you can see in this image, people will find little alcoves to sit in. The image at the bottom is actually some people who put hammocks up in a tree. But we found that there's a lot of just sort of secondary seating on walls and things like that when we have different activities. So with that, we started to look at how does space support our people in the community. And so we have a number of takeaways on this particular page. I won't go into all of them in detail, but we have long crossing signals. We have some streets that have great facades, others that don't have a lot of facades. And we have some areas where there's not a lot of invitations for people to stay for a while. The image I want to draw your attention to the yellow image on the bottom. The image to the left is actually an image of all the parking spaces in downtown, and the image to the right, which is a circle, is taking all of the area of those yellow circles, those yellow squares, and putting them into one. And so you can see, if we were to build one large parking lot in downtown Columbia, that would be the number of blocks it would actually take up. So that has another component of the takeaways and our public spaces in downtown. And so with that, we looked at some strategies. And those strategies were defining a people-first core, and that is a key component actually of Gehl Architects' endeavors in other communities as well as in Copenhagen, really looking at people as the priority for the public spaces. Then parking once, rather than parking in Main Street and then parking in the Vista, park at a location and you walk 5 or 10 minutes to each direction. Embracing the waterfront. Also, number 4 was finding our east-west connector. And then also celebrating, enriching our hubs and creating stepping stones to get between these different hubs. And don't want to go through all of those, but I just did want to define the idea of the people first core. And one of the concepts is to define an area of downtown that is a people first core area, and actually doing things about making the crosswalks more visible, lowering the speed limit on all of the streets within the zone. And you can see a diagram here of what one of their recommendations are for a people first quadrant in the center of downtown. And the next slide here is really testing the strategies. So one of the concepts that's a little bit different from GAL than you might have heard before is, rather than coming up with a plan and then you just build it, like Joanne had said, really the strategy they have is you analyze the public space, then you introduce something and you test it and see if it works. If it doesn't work, that's not a bad thing. If it does work, you build upon that, and then you kind of go back and you refine it. So the idea is you measure, and then you test and refine, and then you re-loop back up to measuring, testing, and refining the public spaces. And that's how you actually can get more vibrant public spaces. And it's an ongoing cycle. There's not a defined beginning and end. The project overview in February, GAL came and presented 7 different concepts to Columbia. That was refined down to 3. You can see all 7 here on this particular screen, but I'm going to highlight the 3 that were rose to the top. It doesn't mean that we couldn't address some of the projects in all 7 of these, but the top 3 were the ones that thought that they were the most achievable in a shortest time frame. So the first one is Main Street and creating places for seating. And the concept here is looking at seating basically that's 5-minute seating, 15-minute seating, and 30-minute seating. And each of those have different characteristics. And you can see these in this different images here. And the columns, you can see 5 and 15 and 30. And they come in different forms. Some are very formal, some are creative. Some are just plastic chairs that you can buy at the a local home improvement store. Some are actually more durable permanent structures. And we found they had a number of key findings, and so that's all kind of defined. There's lots of examples kind of chopped into this document that could easily be we could decide to tackle. The second concept is the connection of Lady Street and connecting activities along Lady. So there's a lot of activities that happen on Lincoln Street and a lot that happen on Main Street, and Lady can be that connection between the 2 different areas where a lot of venues happen, and coordinating venues. So you might have one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and you encourage people to move from one area to the other along Lady. And there's a lot of specific things here about enhancing the tunnel and enhancing Lady Street to make that seamless connection between the 2 areas of the city. And a lot of that has to do with crosswalks and connections. You can see in the bottom slide here, there's in New York City, they actually took some space that had been dedicated to the road, and they made a little park. You have a cycle track, a little park, and then you have 3 lanes of traffic. So it's really looking at opportunities that maybe are not readily visible. And then the third major kind of takeaway project is thinking about the State House grounds as the front porch, and really looking at that as a place for inviting the community and families together. This particular area is interesting in that 20% of the activity in the space is actually physical activity. So rather than standing or sitting or something like that, there's a lot of people who are exercising in this particular space on any given day, and the idea is to actually build upon what's already happening in the State House grounds. And so with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Joanne so she can just kind of say a few last words.
Thanks, John. So again, what we're not asking for is for suddenly the zoning to change and the speed limits go down or the roads are being narrowed. But rather, we have 8 really vibrant ideas, and we have a lot of very creative people within the city who can work together to test them. It might be doing some fun crosswalks. We've talked to First Citizens, for example, and it might be doing some seating in the plaza across from their main building. But if we get the thumbs up from you to test things in a non-permanent way, in a way that's safe and is deliberate and is fun, our goal, working with you, is to have a city that people want to come to regardless of whether or not they're coming for Soda City or a concert at Koger. But they're coming because it's a great place to meet and mingle and be with people. And when they're here, if they're meeting and mingling and being with people, chances are they're going to go into a restaurant or go into a local retail shop and help increase our revenue. So again, nothing permanent, nothing forever, nothing big and expensive that the city has to pay for, but rather try some ideas that have been tried and tested in other locations based on what the folks in our city have said we should do or try. And with your approval, we'll be able to work with the appropriate departments in the city to make sure that what we are doing is, again, smart and timely and will make sense for the long term when we come back and discuss it. So what questions do you have?
Mr. Duval?
John and Joanne, that was a very good presentation. I enjoyed looking. I did have mine working, so I could see the screen. John, in your presentation, you talked about the one-stop, get out your car and walk, and then you'd use trolleys around. Have you made an arrangement for a trolley system that would be used during this test? Because I've always thought that was the essential to connecting our different areas, is to have a free system where you hop on, hop off.
Well, actually, the concept is not so much about having a trolley, it's about parking once and actually walking. So, and we actually have a number of parking garages that are actually, when you look at where the locations of the parking garages are and you draw a circle of what is a 5-minute walk or a 10-minute walk, you can actually be within a 5 or a 10-minute walk of the Vista or a 5 to 10-minute walk of Main Street. So it's the idea of communicating where those parking garages are to people so that they park in those locations, and then they can get to 2 different venues or to get to 2 different areas without having to go out of a garage, drive to another garage, or go to another space. So the idea
Plan where you park so that you would.
it's about communicating where the best parking is so that you can park once and you start to walk, and then you start to enliven those public spaces by actually having people on the street.
Is this test just going to be in the central core? It's not going to extend to 5 Points or eventually to Bull Street?
At this point, it's going to be in the central core because that's what was identified through all of the surveys that we did. I mean, we talked to hundreds of people about where should we start. So let's start somewhere, and as we find ideas that resonate, then we can expand, but we have to start someplace, so it's going to be in the center.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Davis?
I think it's a good concept. I'm kind of like Howard. I was just thinking, and most of it is always city center, core. But I would also be interested in how some of the successful projects sort of included a spin-off, because there are almost in any city, there are unique things that make them special and different. But that also becomes a point for gathering and so forth. And I think it would be good if, because Columbia is also neighborhood oriented, how can that happen as a spin-off, or how does some of the steps and processes you do with this would be helpful to other parts of the city?
What GEL has recommended, and again, they've done work in a number of cities today. They're doing work in New York City, they're doing work in Miami, they're doing work in Lexington, Kentucky. And what they have found to be most successful is you do demonstration projects in the area where you have the highest people moving, the highest number of pedestrians, highest number of cars, so there's more visibility. As people embrace the concept, then it's easier to move into the various neighborhoods. I live in Lake Catherine. going to different places, going to Five Points, going to the Vista, going to Divine, other places. So, but do demonstration projects where people go, wow, I want that too.
I'll just add to that. I think, like Joanne said, New York's one of the communities that Gal's worked in, and they've been working there for a number of years. So they actually started a lot of these examples and refined the techniques for New York in Manhattan, but they've moved it to Queens and to the Bronx and to other areas. So they've actually, and then they do things maybe a little bit differently because it's a different neighborhood, but the base point and how they do it is somewhat similar.
And I think the expectation would be is that we'd start here in this designated place and see how successful. I'm convinced it will be. And there's some natural connectivities to the north and obviously to the west and also to the east and south. So I'm excited about this. So excited and thankful, Joanne, for the Community Foundation's leadership. Incredibly thankful to our staff, John, and you guys have really turned this into something special. I think the inclusive nature within which this has been developed, and just seeing so many eyes and hands on it, and it's been really cool. And I know you chatted it up somewhat before, but it's important to kind of connect the dots. And if you wouldn't mind telling folks about Copenhagen and some folks.
So connecting the dots. So we have had a Knight Foundation fund at the Community Foundation since the 90s. And the Knight Foundation, as you know, has been a big friend of our city. They invested $5 million in transitions. They built the work center at the Richland Library Main on Assembly, and they have funded a number of projects here. A year and a half ago, Mayor Benjamin and I had the opportunity on behalf of Knight to go to San Francisco to see some of these tests in place. And the mayor made such a positive impact. He was asked to be a speaker during the time, and after that meeting, we were invited to be one of 4 cities at GAL. Most recently, Councilwoman Divine and John gave a presentation to Knight and 880 cities for an opportunity to be part of a work-study program funded totally by those 2 organizations to go to Copenhagen. And Ms. Divine impressed them so much with not only her knowledge of a walkable, bikeable city because of the wonderful plan that y'all have approved, but also of her interest in health and children, that they have selected her as one of the participants to go to Copenhagen for an entire week to learn more. So congratulations. There were 24 cities that applied and only 10 were selected. 8 cities were selected and then 2 specials, and Ms. Divine is a special.
It inured significantly to the benefit of this community. So no, thank you for your leadership. This is not only so forward thinking, but it's fun and it's cool, and people are really getting their arms wrapped around it. And so thank you for what you're doing.
And if any of the council folks would like to get more information from either John or myself about the details, because it's a lot. We've been working on this for a year. Just let us know. John has all of the good information, and I can provide the color commentary. So thank you.
And I would just add, Mayor's like hitting me saying, tell them about this, tell them about this. But 2 things I wanted to say. One is another kind of connection of the dots is the museum in Copenhagen has a Monet from Columbia Museum of Art, and it's on display right now. And so Karen has made arrangements for, during some of my free time, to go over and see that. So again, there's a lot of connections here. But the other thing that I just wanted to say is I'm super excited to go, and I thank Joanne for her leadership and thank John for all his hard work and information to help pull this together. But I think most of the council members have met my intern, but I wanted to introduce my intern for the year, Matal Lyons-Warren. Stand up, Matal. Yes, and she is an MSW student at USC, and this is her first project she's worked on for me. And the thing that I'm really excited about. I've been very excited about our work by Columbia Plan and all the things that we're doing with the Greenway and other things. But one of the things that she and John have worked together is not only pulled together information about Gale and what they've done in Copenhagen and other places, but also looked at what other cities are doing that are part of the study group as well. She's pulled together all that information as a study guide for me as I go, and then when I come back with pictures and other information, we'll wrap that together to make a presentation to this council. So I think, again, as the mayor talks about connecting the dots, I think that we've done a great job with a lot of our bicycle and pedestrian friendliness first steps. However, we know that there are a lot more things that we can do as far as utilizing our public spaces, making downtown and other areas of the city welcoming for people to come and play and enjoy, be more bicycle and pedestrian friendly. And so I'm just really excited to look at what Copenhagen has done and then take the information that Matal and John have put together to actually help us build upon where we are. So I think there are a lot of dots that are being connected and a lot of opportunities for the city of Columbia.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Our next item, changes in parking enforcement hours and 5 points. Ms. Gentry will present, our Assistant City Manager for Operations. She will also present to you our parking ordinance revisions as the next item on your agenda.
Okay, so item 3 is, we talked about the last meeting, changes in parking enforcement, and since that time, I have met with 5 points individually as well as the other districts, and the recommendation today is to change the enforcement hours in 5 points to an expanded 6-day enforcement, 11 to 6, for 6 days, which is Monday through Saturday. We're not going later into the evening, and we're not going to do Sunday enforcement.
Okay. Thank you. I think that was it. And Beth, did you have anything else you wanted to add? I know we've had things moving around a little bit, trying to make sure there was some agreement on exactly how we do this. But I know the 5 merchants are happy, and I think we have to be careful not to paint the entire city with a broad brush. But obviously, and I don't think that we're that close and connected as we hope to be in the not too distant future, that you're going to be squeezing a balloon and watching things change around the entire city, which is a concern some of our friends have raised. I mean, I think let's try it, and we might see it might not be what we're looking for, and might have to go back and take another look at it. I think stay in constant communication as you have been with the 3 downtown entertainment districts and hospitality districts, and let's see if something else occurs. But none of it requires any action by council, as I understand it. Right?
That's right, not for that item. The next item is looking at the changes to the ordinance, and actually Jean's going to come up and talk about those.
Good afternoon. As you know, we've been discussing updating our parking ordinance. It's tremendously out of date and doesn't reflect current practices, and as we proceed forward, we want
Tremendously. How much does it cost to park your horse and buggy?
It is 25 cents U.S. coin only currently.
Okay.
But we'd like for that to be updated to reflect modern conveniences like pay by phone and parking cards. So this is sort of the first phase of our implementation of really just reflecting current practices. The way it was written and the way we actually enforce some of these ordinances are not consistent. So our first step was to update that. These are really relatively minor administrative changes, not a lot of substance here, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if you had any questions, to ask them now. You are going to be asked to vote on this at first reading this evening. And then a second round of changes will come with an updated fee schedule and proceeding with decriminalizing a lot of the parking infractions that are currently criminal offenses. Yes, ma'am.
Before you move on, can we get some help? How do we pull up the revisions on here?
It's page 257 in your packet, if that helps.
We're not even there yet. No.
Okay. I apologize.
It keeps going back to the regular, home screen. Well, Ed might have it on his, because he's got the agenda. Mine left that other presentation and went to this. Switch back, okay. You can go ahead and talk
That's
about it,
okay.
and we'll,
I just wanted to give you a chance, when you had a chance to look at it, to ask any questions, if you had any particular questions or anything that troubled you. It's really pretty non-controversial. It's just updating things like, loading zone times to reflect what we actually would like to enforce as opposed to what's written in the ordinance. And again, reflecting that you can pay by phone, you can pay by card, and opening up the possibility that there may be other technologies out there at some point in the future that we want to be able to use for parking instead of having to use meters, since that is the trend in parking services. But I don't think you're going to have any problems or questions with the ordinance. If when you pull it up you do, I can always come back and answer them. That's right.
It prevents hacking of the parking meters. Now, who would have thought several years back we would ever be worried about people hacking into our parking meters?
Just with a hammer.
Still doing
And
that.
that's still in there. Exactly. So if you have any questions, just let me know. But you will be asked to review this on first reading tonight.
Thank you.
Ms. Gentry will now present the stormwater project list, the proposed bond discussion. I asked staff after the last discussion to come back, which I know this is probably a discussion that Mr. Badura wanted to participate in, but we'll brief him separately. At this point, it sounds like you all are very interested in narrowing down a list of projects. If and when we decide to issue a bond, or however we get there, what I heard from you last time was, I understand y'all might want to get a consultant to kind of go through everything from a financial standpoint and make a recommendation on rates. But can we at least have a discussion about the low-hanging fruit of what you know to be problem areas across the city and the projects that we would include if we move forward? So that's really the intent of the discussion today.
So today, we will only talk about the list of possible projects, and then at a later time, we'll talk about whether we need an increase in the stormwater fee for bond, or whether we can bond on our own.
So you have a hard copy of this presentation as well, so we're here to talk again about the stormwater proposed bond ordinance. And the topics today will be looking at the prioritization list for projects, our projects already funded, as well as proposed projects that could be on a bond list, and then some other proposed projects that would not really fit into a bond list category, and then the next steps. So this list is not new to you. You've probably seen this every year when we talked about stormwater projects. This is the prioritization of how we rank our projects. This doesn't mean this is how we fund our projects, because a lot of the larger projects would fit into the highest category, but they're also very expensive to solve. But this is, we will assign numbers to projects according to these categories. I did want to point out there's a lot of projects already funded. So as we're looking at the list for proposed bonds, I didn't want you to lose sight of what's already on our existing list, because these are important projects that you're all familiar with. And if we didn't point this out, you may think we had forgotten about them, but we haven't. A lot of these are underway right now, or they're studies in process. I do want to point out Rocky Branch is part of the Congaree River Basin, and Smith Branch is part of Broad River Basin. So we've broken those down into some of the actual branches.
when you say currently funded, all of these are not 100% funded, are they?
All of these projects are funded. There may be more phases of these projects. For instance, you'll see a lot of Rocky Branch projects on here. That doesn't mean that's all that's needed in Rocky Branch, but the supplemental project is 100% funded. Yes, ma'am, everything on this list is funded.
Well,
Is funded?
I guess the question is, so if you look at the next page, are these funded projects deducted from the larger amount?
They are not. They are separate than the larger amount on the next page. So a proposed bond list, and I said at the last meeting it could range from 10 million to, I think I said 60 million at the time, but as we started looking at projects and looking at some of the recent studies, the Smith Branch Watershed Study, the Rocky Branch Watershed Study, and the Gills Creek Study. A lot of those studies added a significant amount of projects to our list. So you will see, for instance, the last project on this list, you'll see Rocky Branch Watershed, it's $21 million. The study itself recommended $38 million of projects, but some of those are already identified independent of this larger one. So you'll see a pretty large number for Smith Branch as well. You see 34 million. Those are individual projects that have not yet been separated out of that study. These obviously, this exceeds what we would be able to bond. We will start the process of going through here and prioritizing these lists, and our plan is to put them into pots of $10 million. So as we go through the analysis of the bond, we will know, once we determine how much we're able to bond, we will then have projects already identified for that amount. Mr. Davis?
Before you get way ahead of me, I'm looking at the currently funded projects. This is just a question. For example, the Randall Street is on this list, but on the proposed list for the bond, it's also on there. So
There's multiple phases of that project.
okay.
And I guess,
That's
Missy, going back, that was kind of my point. I think we need to be careful with this list when it says funded, because we know that there are several projects on there that are in phases. But to the average person looking at this, they don't understand that. And so then the question becomes, well, you had it on the list and said it was funded, why are we not doing this? And then we know that there are other additional phases, and I know some of the additional phases are the actual real work versus, so we want to make sure we
Sometimes
clarify
phase
that.
one will be the study, and then you
Right.
get to
We
construction.
need to
That's right.
make sure that's
We can
clarified.
try to identify, like for Randall, it's actually in different segments. We can try to add that description to be more clear. So again, we have possibility of $112 million. Do not believe a bond can be issued for that amount, so we will need to go through this list and start prioritizing, and we will be doing that over the next several weeks to months. We also have some projects we have identified that would be non-bond projects. Typically, when we bond projects in our water and sewer fund, it's really your significant projects. Other maintenance type projects, we don't bond, we spend cash for those projects. So this is just an example of what that list would look like for stormwater. As we're going through the analysis, we will likely recommend that we keep out X dollars from our annual revenue to address problems like these, or projects like this.
Without the consultant, without a rate increase, have we determined how much we can bond in stormwater infrastructure?
The answer is no, we have not determined, because we know we don't have a current bond issued out there, so we can use all the revenues as they come through on projects. It's part of the reason we want to bring in a consultant, because issuing bonds puts new restrictions on the system as an enterprise system. It'll put covenants out there, so we're going to have coverages. It's some of the things that we talk about often in water and sewer. So I don't know right now. That's why we're pulling all the information in together. We don't know what we could bond with current rates. That will be the goal of utilizing someone to come in and look at the system and say, okay, here's what we have currently, here's what we could issue, and if we have an increase, here's the additional amount that we could issue in bonds.
You know my next question. You always go ahead and answer it. My next question. You know what that is.
How soon?
No. Green. Green infrastructure.
Oh, green bonds.
Green infrastructure bonds. And Jeff's I've asked the questions. He's answered it, but not to my satisfaction. And this question is probably less for you and more so for Missy or some of her staff. Is there an evaluative process that we go through to determine if some of these projects can be achieved, or the net effect can be achieved utilizing green infrastructure that seeks to restore the natural flow of water? And is there a process? And if not, there probably should be. And secondly, is there any way in which we can get some type of credit mitigation credits from EPA or something else to deal with our larger, more global issues that feed into that?
We can, actually, 3 of the projects on the currently funded list are supplemental environmental projects that were part of our negotiations with EPA. So certainly EPA recognizes the need to look at sustainability and green infrastructure and different ways of performing the work. If you will recall, we did a low-impact development project in Shandon. It was, the bids came in a lot higher than we had estimated.
This is this a storage?
It was the pervious pavement and just some low-impact type development. Our recommendation for Shandon right now is the hard infrastructure project, the hard piping. It's a $12 million project. You'll see it on the proposed list as Shandon Phase 2. Feel like that would be more successful in solving the flooding problems that exist. There has not been a very aggressive approach to looking at new technologies as far as this list of projects. We can certainly do that, though.
I think that would be important to me. I think to you all as well. And is there a way, without the influence of politics, to also influence the ranking of this list, or is this a ranking? This is not a ranking.
That is not a ranking. Staff will use this list in front of you to rank these projects based on the nature of the flooding that occurs, if it's life-threatening, if it gets into structures, if it's major yard flooding or minor yard flooding. So we will come back with that recommendation based on this list right here.
Any other environmental considerations we can add into that process?
Certainly. Do you have any in mind that?
A few.
Okay. Certainly, we can look at some other options.
I'm sorry. Please. Please, Ed.
Just a question of clarification. Why are the non-bonded projects excluded from the bonded projects?
They are much smaller in nature, and typically they're more maintenance instead of capital. And the city has not typically bonded maintenance type projects, meaning it may be cleaning a ditch, it may be replacing 100 feet of pipe. It's not a major investment or major improvement that can be capitalized. Therefore, we typically do not bond those. It doesn't mean they're not important and they're not high priority. It just means we would recommend spending cash rather than bonding those projects.
All right. Thank you. And Missy, I'm going to ask this, then I'll call on Mr. Duval and Mr. Davis because I don't want to forget my question. Which happens a lot lately. As we're going through this process, determining how we rank these, are we also going to look at which projects make the most significant, appreciable difference? I mean, in the aggregate. I mean, obviously, flooding at one home is as important to that one homeowner as might be at 100 homes, but that's also part of the criteria.
Yes,
so,
absolutely.
Okay. Mr. Duval.
I just wanted to support the mayor's question a minute ago about using some innovative solutions to the flooding problems that we've had. I get from time to time emails from people with all sorts of what I think are pretty good ideas that could be used. We've tried it in Shandon. You seem to say that it didn't work too spectacularly.
It did work in the areas that we performed it. It was more expensive than we had originally estimated, and to impact a greater area, the hard pipe is going to be a better solution. There's a few pockets in Shandon that has some pretty severe flooding.
Well, I would encourage you, as the mayor has, to reach out to other groups that might put some brain power on it and see if we can come up with some innovative ways to take care of these traditional problems.
Sure. And as the CFO would tell you, we're asking about green infrastructure bonds, and it's still in public finance, still fairly green territory. Is that fair to say? And there are a number of folks working to increase kind of market demand for these types of projects, but I'll tell you, I mean, that's the way the world is going, and I think anything and everything we can do to kind of lead in that way, in which you get, a double or triple benefit from your activities, we need to be thinking in that direction. Ms. Davis?
Just two things.
I'm not sure you're on. Sam, I'm not sure your microphone's on.
Not on.
Press your button.
Okay. The green infrastructure, I'm going to get back to that. But one question I have, the non-bonded needs versus bonded. I was out today looking at a couple of storm drain issues with staff. And a number of these things are along state-maintained roads. Maybe just be right at the right-of-way point, and then a few on the interior of neighborhoods. Is there any way we could maybe have our friends at DOT maybe take over those kind of maintenance requirements? Because sometimes once it gets behind, then it becomes unsightly, and folks don't tend to understand why it's at that point. I would be interested to see if there's some trade-offs there we can work out when that, takes the burden off of you guys, where, we've got more pressing needs in some areas.
You're asking if we can get them to maintain their ditches?
Yeah. Ditches, and there's some areas where, we want to see the need to pipe, and
they don't
see the need to pipe. So if we can't pipe, then technically, who's going to be responsible for maintenance when the problem would be resolved by piping? And I understand the U.S. waterways issue also, but we can mitigate some of that. But I'm just thinking, if there's some ways that they can take over some of those responsibilities from you guys, I would like to see us go for it.
Well, and we do not maintain all of DOT ditches. We do work with them very closely. I know that there have been times when we've made a request to pipe a ditch and it's been declined. The engineering logic behind that is sometimes a ditch functions better for the water flow than a pipe system will. Mm-hmm. Obviously, to that individual property owner or the community, they'd rather see it piped in flat land and not a ditch. We will certainly work with DOT as closely as we need to. We can't make commitments for them, but I think Robert probably knows what areas you were in today. But
we were three today, so it just boggles my mind that these are the challenges, and we can't do anything about it. It's beyond our control. So if you guys can't get to it, it's out there. It's alleged that we're not, or you guys are not doing your work. Not necessarily the case. I think, the system we have and the way it's organized and the structure it precedes everybody in this room, but that's not to say we can't be more creative in making some stuff happen.
We will continue to be aggressive with DOT and see what we can make happen. I think
I understand.
We have always done that, and we will continue to do that.
I understand.
I do want to point out that the initial analysis for a bond will be to look at our current rate structure and our current revenues to see what it can support, and then we will run analysis to see what different levels of increase would support as well. And then I wanted to wrap up talking about the NRCS money. You've probably heard us talk a lot about that since October. We were awarded some funds from Natural Resources Conservation Service, and those projects are underway. The Penn Branch, Smith Branch, and Rocky Branch projects are underway, and reminder, Penn Branch is part of the Gills Creek watershed, so there's projects going on in Gills Creek. We will also be applying for additional NRCS funding in conjunction with our partner agencies, Richland County and Forest Acres. So just wanted to make you aware those projects are going on. That's just south of $1 million.
Missy, when you say that the projects are underway, are we cleaning out the Gills Creek debris?
We We are. Well, actually, we have contractors out there, but we've bid those projects, and there's a little bit of the work we're performing in-house, and then we have contractors out in the areas.
Jackson Boulevard and Divine
I'm
Street.
going to have to no, not all of those areas. Some of that is in the additional sections that we're going to have to request, and there were some dynamics related to this particular pot of money that didn't allow us to get all the way downstream because we couldn't access some of those areas. But we do have contractors out on site right now, and Robert can step up if he's in here to talk specific locations if you want to know.
Got to think if I can remember them. One of them is Penn Branch between Wood Lake, going around the corner to Little Lake Catherine. There's a hydro excavation truck out there right now that is vacuuming the silt out of the creek. They were on site as of yesterday. There's another contractor in town that yesterday started on Smith Branch over behind the old Sam's.
Yeah.
I believe they completed that project yesterday. They will still have some areas up above Summerlee, and they'll have the other section of Penn Branch from Trentham Road around to Wood Lake to remove the debris, some on Wildcat to remove the debris and do some bank stabilization. Then our forces are going to do a little spot down off of Sumter Street in Rocky Branch, and they will also rebuilding the wall on Converse.
Good.
And we have 65 days to complete all the projects.
All right. All right. Any questions? So next steps are?
And time frame?
Next steps would be prioritize the potential bond list, and we are going through the process of hiring a consultant. That I want to point out, that's going to be a much quicker process than with water and sewer. Our stormwater utility is not near as complicated or massive as our water and sewer, and there's a flat rate. There's not all these different rates based on customer base and all, so it's a very quick process. So we're starting that process. I would think by the beginning of the calendar year, we would have some recommendations. I was looking at Jeff to see if he concurs with that. That would be our goal.
I'd say move post haste.
The priority list will happen before that, but as far as all of the
engaging a
analysis needed to
consultant,
be able to bond.
If you got a reputable consultant that you can hang your hat on, and I'm not sure what those fees look like. I don't need to see the consultant, to be honest with you. I'd say just move forward under your authority, Teresa, if it means it accelerates the process. But again, I don't know what that looks like financially.
And I guess I was just wondering, would it be possible just to have between Jeff and bond attorneys to look at what we could do with our current revenue, and then if that means we move forward with saying we're going to do something there? Because if you do a rate study, if you have a consultant and the consultant says, yes, you need to increase rates to do X, Y, and Z, that would happen next budget year, within the budget year anyway, because we'd have to have a public hearing about the rate and all that kind of stuff. So I'm just wondering, could we not move forward with what we know we could bond with the recommendation of bond attorney and CFO, and then we can still undertake that process, and then we can discuss that as part of our budget, whether or not we want to entertain a rate increase or not.
I think a lot of it is workload.
I think I've heard y'all loud and clear for the last 2 meetings that you're not that interested in spending a lot of time on a consultant and to figure out what we can go ahead and do. So
Time is not our friend. Time is not our friend.
I understand.
And I think we'd much rather be moving forward very clearly than waiting, especially those things that we know we can't control. Obviously, workload is an entirely separate issue, and we understand that. You guys are amazing, so I know you can make it all happen.
We got it.
And let me also add, this right now is an unrated system, so we're going to have to talk to rating agencies. They're going to ask a lot of questions. They're going to want to understand how we've come up with the numbers and everything else. So the more information we are able to provide them, and utilizing other outside consultants other than just city staff, it'll be, we're trying to get the best cost of funds as well. than any of the bonds. So we are working quickly, though. I think Missy already mentioned it, on trying to get an RFP, RFQ out so that we can get a consultant in here. I don't think this is going to be a very long drawn out. It's not like a water and sewer rate consultant. When they come in, they have to look at all of our customer base. They have to look at all the different rates, everything that's out there. We have a very, I'll say, a more simplified customer base when it comes to just stormwater. I do not think this is going to be a 6 or 8 or 10-month type study that's needed. I think it's something that we can do very quickly so that we can have answers coming back.
We'll bring back.
It'll help justify.
We'll bring back
anything
a
that we do.
recommendation on what we can get done post haste.
Gracias.
Thanks. Mr. Mayor, do you all want to entertain a motion to go into executive session?
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to add a number 9, discussion of employment of an employee.
You want to make the whole motion?
Okay, so I would move that we go in executive session for discussions incident to proposed contractual arrangements, parking, discussions of matters relating to the proposed location expansion or the provision of services encouraging location or expansion of industries or other businesses in the area served by the public body, receipt of legal advice which relates to matters covered by attorney-client privilege, U.S. DOT versus Association of American Railroads, and the discussion of employment of an employee.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion. Seeing none, with the previous question, clerk call the roll.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Ms. Devine?
Aye.
Mr. Davis?
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin?
Aye. And
Thank you.
Teresa, can we make it a point to give Mr. Badura that full presentation as well?
Yes,
Okay, I know it's important to him.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.